But yeah, bells are very interesting. They're definitely frequency. And if you look into like the myths and things about bells, a lot of them say that they were to keep trolls away. So it's were they used to enhance positive energies and keep negative energies away? I think that's what's happened is we had protection as part of this system, but when it was taken apart by whatever happened, probably some kind of cataclysm, then that allowed a nefarious force to move in, shall we say.
Raised by Giants live discussion. Welcome everyone in the chat. Good to see you guys out there, and any moderators or channel members. We have an amazing, never before done show today, which is always great when you get to see or hear something for the first time. A dynamic duo of David Dubine from Adapt 2030 channel and Cambell from the Autodidactic channel. Today, Lost History, Star Force, Ancient Power Sources, Nikola Tesla, and I've really been looking forward to it.
Now, there's a place called Lago de Garda, which means Lake Garda. And if you look, there was a star fort right at the very south edge of that. And in the 1650s maps, it shows that it's definitely an island within a river. It looks like it's a couple miles off the lake. But then if you look at the 1755 maps, that is in the lake. It's not even, it's a remnant of some sort of foundations that are at the side of the lake. So some transition happened there. So I'm starting to look at a lot of finding single points on the map like that one is a good start. And just finding as many maps from that same exact area for as many dates as I can and just overlaying them to look at the changes. But that's one of my best examples, that Lago de Garda with that star fort originally in the river center as an island in the river that went around it. That suddenly some earth change happened and that thing is inside. And the old port of Rome as well, the same exact thing happened. That ended up 1.2 miles inland. So what's going on with these events here where suddenly ports are not used any longer and there's massive shifts in geologic feature that rivers run in different directions and then ports are no longer usable. And then they just tell you something simple like, oh, it's silted up. They didn't use it any longer. I kept getting that excuse too. I'd always ask, why didn't they use that port anymore? Oh, well, river changed course. It's silted up. Well, I'm like, dude, how many rivers can change course in a very short period of time where your entire port system is rendered useless? Like what event happened during that very short couple decades? Non-functional ports, and then you got to rebuild new ports because everything shifted in its river course.
I think we have cyclical resets or catastrophes, whatever you want to call them as well. I mean, you can see it in all the old maps. We've got islands that appear and disappear, continents change shape, or, environments change. It's, we've all heard the woolly mammoth, right? That was ice frozen with tropical food in its mouth in Siberia. So clearly we have events that change things pretty quickly, but they're not rivers silting up. It's much bigger forces that I think we're talking about.
Well, you know how you get 1,000 years of no progression is people that have the ability to create any of this stuff, right? If you kill the builders of something, then no one knows how to build anything. It would take them a really long time to be able to figure out how to build a house.
Brought to you by ITM Trading. ITM Trading has spent the last 28 plus years developing a team of expert researchers and gold and silver analysts to make this possible. Simply put, we build strategies which are historically proven to protect your wealth and assets through any economic downturn. 866-834-1422. That's 866-834-1422.
If you have a few people, just to give an example, like you have a city, one person, a few people know how to build buildings. If you kill those people, nobody knows how to build buildings. And it's going to take them a really long time in order to figure out how to build buildings again, then you effectively get rid of the technology. You get rid of whatever it is that needed to be built.
I mean, I think in some circumstances, with intricate technology, you could make that argument. If you took everyone out, but I believe everyone's born a genius, and it's the education system that takes that away from them. Humans are so ingenious, especially when they're in a situation where they need to be. And if you have houses you can look at and see, then it wouldn't take long for people to work out how to build them. Maybe with advanced electronics, but to me that's just part of this story. It's the system that has put us here, that's introducing all the poisons into our food system, water system, that create the education system, and money, tax, you can go there, politics, and that's repressing the humans. But you get a human away from that. And I mean, look at children, look at babies. You don't get a dumb baby. I think that's just a story they want us to believe about ourselves, because if we believe that, then we're we're less likely to fight back against their rules, right?
I will say one thing. I have we have a forest on our property here, and it doesn't take long till you understand how suspension of trees falling over in a storm can form a structure, and you could probably replicate that. Trees are falling down in our forest all the time. We got pine property here that was part of on the very edge of our property was an old logging company's land, and those trees are continuously falling down, and they fall down in formations where they become structurally sound. I mean, just something that simple should reboot civilization itself, of coming with that base of, all right, we can make something in a concave structure. Wow, I wonder if we put those things straight and did some T's across them, if we could make something as well. So it's taught out of us, or we're supposed to be so specialized and laser niched on our specialties that nobody's a generalist. I'm not sure exactly how that would have been done when you're taking the innate observational powers from a human being away of the platonic solids or nature itself with cylinders and cross beams, and then evaporate that out of any possibility of being able to put that together and create something from it. There's a lot of things I just can't get in terms of timelines. Again, it all rolls back to that again. That massive wipeout of life would have had to have been so massive that you would really come down to just millions of people left on the planet to take 1,000 years to restart it again.
Well, I mean, that applies if someone sees a house, yeah, they might be able to duplicate a house, but that doesn't apply to a pyramid. We can't duplicate a pyramid.
Yeah,
so just
that.
because you can see it and look at it doesn't mean that you can rebuild it. And several civilizations throughout history have tried, and it's garbage. They can't do it.
Yeah.
They're lopsided, they're really crappily, you know what I mean? Like it's
yeah. But that wasn't the Dark Ages. But yeah, I agree. Anything technical like that.
Yeah, well, then you also have the cataclysm thing of this, and like resets. So who's to say that this wasn't a cataclysmic event that started this, and a lot of people were wiped out, and this reset started, and the technology was lost? Would you not think that would be a possibility?
Yeah. No, I think a reset. There's a lot of books that seem to show people going out and rediscovering these sort of battered places. But I don't think, in my mind, these resets and catastrophes that happen aren't worldwide. It's not like one thing takes out the whole world. It seems that happens every now and again, but it seems that we have smaller, more precise ones a lot of the time. Just looking at all the different ruins around, that could definitely reset. But 1,000 years, that's a long time for people to just sit around and do nothing.
Right, because you got to think about the Chinese had established trade routes through the Silk Road, through Central Asia, over into, let's say Turkey. But then we had the Roman Empire, which established trade routes all through North Africa and all through Europe, obviously. even if there was a cataclysm, those very ends of the road, for the better term, would have still had trade routes and still been somewhat intact. So they would have had the stories about, if we just go far enough that way, we're going to find other people that are going to trade with us. So even that simplest of, we can't set off on a horse or a camel or bring an oxen train with us to go find those people out there that used to be there to try to trade with them again through the old stories. And there's been resets in China too, like these grand solar minimums that pop up and these emperors. Now, another fact for anybody to check out, there's never been a period of time longer than 400 years that emperor and the house of the emperor has been in power. For some reason, they always collapse and are usurped by new power bases every 400 years or so. So look at those dynasties over there. They never last longer than 400 years. And you need to ask yourself, why? Is it a micro reset like you're talking about? Was it a global reset? That could be, you know, once every 5 of those cycles, once every mini cycle, maybe 2 continents have something, or 1 continent has something happen to it. But then as you come around over these, you know, 2,000-year periods, or some boom that happens globally, and then it sets us back. Because I was wondering about electromagnetism as well, where, you know, if we come into a different electromagnetic field, the way we process information in our brains is going to change, because those lobes of your brain are electromagnetically connected. Electricity fires your brain off. Well, if there's an interruption in that magnetic field, perhaps you're not able to operate and you lose your functionality and dexterity, or who knows what would happen. But maybe children aren't as affected of this different magnetic field state. There's just a lot of things to put into in terms of natural cataclysms and cycles. And then is it just brute force from a comet strike or some sort of meteor impact? Or is it electromagnetic field, where we're going to a 0 state of electromagnetic field and our planet can tip on itself? Is it a change in that electromagnetic field state that affects, you know, not only animal migrations, but then human behavior, perception, et cetera, that upsets that balance? Or maybe people can't feed themselves for a week or 2 and then they die because they can't even drink water. They don't know how, they forget to drink water. But the remnants are left. And I'll say one last thing. When we were in Verona, I was talking to a coffee shop owner there, restaurant coffee shop owner, who also believed the same thing. He's like, Romans up here, we're talking about stumbling into cultural layers below them. The ancient Romans, we're talking about cultural layers below them here in Verona. And they find always these different layers of time that are buried in between, like 1.5 to maybe 3 feet. And they'll find it, they build on top. There's too much energy to dig it out. And then they find another layer. So it's like a layer cake going down. And for some reason, which I didn't understand, is they stopped at certain layers. They just wouldn't go any deeper. And I was asking, well, you know, there's other layer. Why don't you go any deeper? And they're like, well, the funding for this stopped. And you dig yourself. There's something else under there, even deeper than that. But for some reason, I don't know what. And Israel's the same. They go down to the layers right around, you know, Christian era time, 2,000 years prior, and they just stop all the digs right there. And we find this is a routine thing that I keep finding again and again. The cultural layers, as soon as they come to a certain prior time in the past, they never want to go deeper. Explain that one to me. When you know something else is down there deeper.
They're hiding. They don't want us to know. You know, I mean, 2,000 years is an interesting time frame. If you think about the precession of the equinox, like the last age was what, 2,600-ish years. You know, that could be where all the good stuff is, right? The stuff that's like not from this epoch kind of stuff.
I mean, what kind of things are you finding? Because I saw one of your videos where you'd walk around, was it Multivoon, where you found a whole series of foundations out there that were,
yeah,
megalithic. I mean, they were very, very, very large stones, but they looked like they were in semicircles and stacked in terrace layers. And it should have been a major tourist site if it was. I'm just asking the question.
But yeah, we found one hill that looked to be man-made. It was just big, you know, what looked like high quartz content, rocks everywhere, or, you know, definite walls and terraces and you know, machined blocks, or, you know, at least shaped blocks. And then further away, we found 3 on the top of these 3 hills. One was a standing circle, standing stones, and the other one looked like almost like a mini star fort. It was a big sort of, I don't know, megalithic construction. It had big terraces going down the hill and stuff, heaps and heaps and heaps of stone in there, and that stuff's all around. Well, it's just, and it was just in the bush. We just walked through some guy's farm field and into the bush and up a hill, and there it was. And because they're not publicized, not many people know they're there. We just sort of happen to know people who sort of told us, point us in the right direction. But there's stuff everywhere. Like around where I'm in Bosnia, there's pyramids everywhere, and again, old sort of megalithic sites. There's the megalithic balls that I went and saw. One of them's 40 tons. There's just this stuff. It's everywhere, and I think we're just starting to really uncover it. We were sort of told as well growing up, it's just the pyramids in Egypt, and then there's a few in South America, and we've got Stonehenge, and we've got this, but it's looking like this stuff is everywhere. And that's why I'm starting to think that it's the remnants of an old grid or grids. Who knows if they're from different times, but it looks like they all have different functions. A lot of the hills and mounds that they've uncovered here, like layered, like geopolymer clay, like they're a battery, right? So, and the pyramids got water under it, and all they're like detecting argon in there and negative ions and all these, electromagnetic fields. So it looks like it's all part of a system. And I mean, probably more than one. Is probably, the pyramids are probably the oldest system, and then, they rebuilt it after a cataclysm with star forts maybe, and then maybe after that it was all the big red brick buildings and canals and stuff. But it's, the way I look at it is that's the natural grid, right? Built on the energy ley lines, the natural energy points of the Earth. And so I call that the macro grid. And then these, whoever they are that have come in and taken the power, that they want us in a micro grid, right? And they want us in our phone, like the circuit board grid. And that's the L, right? The electric, the people that we elect into power.
Elohim.
Elohim, right? Interesting. So, yeah. Oh, that's my little point. Don't know where I was going.
Well, let me ask you about the quartz then. You brought that up. What do you think about the, how does that fit into an electrical grid using Paleozoic effects with quartz then?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you put quartz under pressure, it releases piezoelectric energy. You can also store energy. You can store information in quartz. As far as I know, you can use them as to direct the energy as well, like to point it. So I think it's a big part. And we use crystals, right, which is basically quartz. We use them in watches and computers and chipboards and all that kind of stuff these days. So I think they were, definitely part of the energy system of the grid that was out there. More part of the, I guess, what we would think of as the electronic sort of components, directing energy flow, maybe stabilizing the frequencies and things like that, storing information as well, because you can store information in them, and everything we see, right? It's all sandstone or lime. It's all full of quartz.
And with that water delivery, you mentioned weight under pressure. So 8 pounds per gallon. Imagine actual areas where they could redivert the water that would flow in and flood, say, a large lake size, and put a couple million pounds of pressure on top of that, create the electric discharge, and then, let that electrified water go off and, irrigate the farm fields. Then it comes through in a pulse, just like we have, alternating current or whatever. Could it not be pulsed like that, but on a much more larger level? Its scale, its scale would be just astronomical compared to anything coming down an electric line here. Although they're not really delivering you electricity, they're just making the electrons pulse. You're really, I want to pay my electric bill by the electron because I'm reusing the same electron back and forth again on my wire, right? So they're not giving me electricity. Yeah, I saw you laugh when I said that. You understand that one?
Yeah. Had a bit of a look into that one. Yeah, it's all a scam, man. It's we've had, as far as civilizations on Earth, we've had this free electricity. We've had machines that structure water, which I think might have been part of what the star forts were doing as well, structuring water. Basically that was a grid and technology that was for us, to enhance us, to enhance our bodies, our minds, our spirits. And now what we've got is the complete opposite. And, you know, we're seeing the effects of that. You know, they tell us that people didn't live long and were short in the past. But when you know, you just got to read about the Greek philosophers, and most of those lived into their 80s and 90s. And, you know, like this whole perception of we're at the best point in the epitome of man, you know, humankind now, it's just not true. Like we've fallen, man. We're way below where we used to be.
Yeah, and a lot of the statues that we're seeing in Italy specifically, not so much in other places, but the stone statues, you know, were life size of the individuals. And they were, you know, I'm 6'4", and I was looking up at these things. They're like 6'8", and built like a pro wrestler, every one of them. And they were supposedly life size of the individuals that were represented in the carvings. And I'm thinking, you got an entire society of 6'8", 6'10", you know, incredibly powerful people running around. And then you look at in the paintings and you see in the size of that, even what is considered the regular guards of the day, quote unquote. But then the kings themselves were much larger. So if you're going to take, and they, well, that's artistic creativity. They wanted to make the king this, you know. I think they were painting to the realism was what we see in terms of stature and girth and size of the individuals at the time. So, you know, history tells you one thing, that, yeah, they were pygmies, and, you know, we finally grew up and we're 6 foot now from that, from all of whatever. But it seems like every single one of these resets, the persons get a little smaller.
Yep. Yes. Yeah, I'd agree with that.
But the architecture is really big. You have these giant doorways, you have these giant steps. You know, it's so interesting how they want to make it seem like that people were a lot shorter, but everything was built for really big people.
Yeah, some of the doors, like, they actually have door handles on them that you know, even you couldn't reach, Dave. Like, they got these handles like 10 foot off the ground. It's crazy. So what, you know, how old are those buildings, and what were those doors for? But, you know, we've got swords, we've got armor, we've got skeletons, we've got so much evidence of
so giant, like
of giants. Basically, it's not just a fairy tale, kids.
Maybe the fairy tales are the truth that you referenced that wasn't ever written down. That you say, how did the peasants pass information? Well, through fairy tales, children's stories, etc. But perhaps that's the truth that could not be written down.
That makes sense. And when it comes to these grids and these like PowerPoints, Campbell, you referenced earlier that it seems like these megalithic sites and these star forts and a lot of this were like power, like energy sources, which seem very plausible, especially when you look at the Mayan complex in Mexico, laid out like a grid and the motherboard of a computer and a cell phone. And it seems like back in the day, it was more like structures on Earth that were creating this grid. And now now everyone is the grid.
Yeah,
right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Now people are the grid. Now we're carrying around the grid with us in our pocket.
The macro grid to the micro grid, right? The nature versus the electronics. And that's what they're trying to push us into. I mean, you know, look at all the VR stuff and virtual worlds and the talk about that, and, you know, the whole not moving and just playing our part in their grid and to be totally controlled by electronics. And it's interesting, right? Because they say that the jinn were created from smokeless fire. You know, what's electricity, right? Smokeless fire.
Yeah, and carrying a mobile phone out into a nature area, what kind of electromagnetic resonance would that leave in a pure state of nature as you walked through with your, you know, phone on, maybe not connected, maybe connected to a cell network, but, you know, what kind of resonance does that leave in a pure environment? You know, because then they can contaminate the environment with electromagnetic pollution. Because you just said it there, the old buildings were built of, like you said, quartz and different types of substrate that could carry current and in a grid. But now you look at today's world, it's concrete. Like, we've turned a substrate that has no real electrical capacity to be the base of all of the buildings, at least in the highways and these sort of things. Think about megalithic stones that were actually the stanchions for some of our 8-lane superhighways versus poured concrete and rebar that's shorting out the system. Like just the very building materials themselves, either able to carry current, and that would be electromagnetic and knowledge, both. It's a frequency, or not.
What is the most conductive element that we know about? Do either one of you know, like, what's the most conductive element? Is it copper? Is copper the most conductive, or silver?
I don't know for sure. Copper would be up there, and it's gold everywhere over these old world buildings. You know, all the gold domes and other bits and pieces. It's all gold, which is interesting because it's all looks like it's gold plated, right? And you need electricity to do that. But they tell us that they didn't have electricity back when some of these buildings were built. But
and Cambell, can I ask you a question? When you went, I know you're looking around some cathedrals and more ancient building thing. Have you seen any of the copper lines in up the walls or on the floors and any of these? Have you noticed that too?
Yeah, definitely. Right up to the antennas on the roof and down the walls, and I've saw it at some star forts as well, in different buildings and old towns. I mean, it looks like they were collecting energy, right? And especially the cathedrals. Obviously, they got resonance, right? They got their organs, they got their choirs, they got their bells. So it was the whole thing was about frequency and resonance, and I kind of think that's why they were taken over, by the religions, is because that's where you felt close to the Creator, because of the resonance, right? And they just changed it to feel close to our God kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, I think there were healing centers as well, but definitely part of some kind of grid where they were collecting and distributing, or at least using some kind of energy source. I've also seen a few instances where it shows that these cathedrals are built over big water tanks, basically big water vats, right? Which is just wherever there's water under a building, I'm pretty sure it's like an electrical creating device. But yeah, I've definitely seen the strapping. It's a lot.
I'll say one thing about the bells. Also in the city of Verona, in the castle there, they had some World War II photos, and our American soldiers had thousands of bells in a courtyard. They'd stripped out of everywhere there was a bell. I was like, there's that many bells that they could even strip out of. Apparently every single building had bells. Homes had bells, churches had bells, everywhere had bells in these different configurations, some of them longer, but they put out a different frequency. And they stripped everything in the 40s of bells. There was none left. Yeah. And they were like, well, they needed to melt it down for this and that. And the excuse was written in a couple paragraphs, but stripping the frequency out of human range, I think, was more the point.
Yeah. I don't think we've got any original bells. I think they've put some back in some cathedrals and that, but they're not the original ones. And they even say that they can't make the alloy that the original bells were made out of anymore. They just lost the technology somewhere along the line, apparently. But yeah, bells are very interesting. They're definitely frequency. And if you look into like the myths and things about bells, a lot of them say that they were to keep trolls away. So it's were they used to enhance positive energies and keep negative energies away? I think that's what's happened, is we had protection as part of this system, but when it was taken apart by whatever happened, probably some kind of cataclysm, then that allowed a nefarious force to move in, shall we say. At this point, I think we've got to question everything, and everything's got to be at least a possibility. I don't think we should say that's right and this is wrong, because then you're kind of stuck. But if everything's interesting, then I think that the past is much different than what they want us to believe it was.
We don't have to worry about not having food to last. We have my Patriot supply. And right now, you can save $200 on a 3-month food kit with ADAPT 2030. Adapt and stay prepared.